All right, well, welcome everyone to the Motyv podcast. My name is Shayden, and I'm a marriage and family therapist. I focus on men's mental health a lot. I also work with women who are trying to understand men, and I'm excited to be here with Sadie and Phyllis. And they're not nervous at all.
Sadie's probably not. I am.
Yeah, I'm all right.
Just a little bit.
A little bit.
It's such a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good thing to do it. It makes you get done and you'll feel rewarded. So, but we're going to jump into a topic that I'm excited to get into. And it's something that so Sadie and Phyllis are both pushing themselves to specialize in this area. Phyllis is in school right now, right?
Yep, Utah State.
So for therapy. So so today you're taking the role as our student.
Inquisitive student. Yep.
And so she's going to be asking a lot of questions and offering too, but you have a lot to offer. And I think
Thanks,
you gotta
Shayden.
make sure you own that. Just because you don't have a degree doesn't mean a whole lot, to be honest. And then Sadie, you're going to be guiding us on this one, right?
Sure.
Is that the role we took?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be I love acting like the client too.
Okay.
Right. So obviously in this world, relationships, as you know, relationships matter. And I say that all the time. Relationships matter most. And it's, again, if everything else fails in life, if you have relationships, you have everything. And so when relationships break, it's painful. And there's often a word for that called betrayal. Or I would say when a reason that relationships break is called betrayal. And I shouldn't say called. One of the reasons relationships can break is through betrayal. And anyone who's gone through betrayal, I mean, we were talking about this on Friday, and point blank, Phyllis and Sadie looked at me and said, "Hey, Shayden, what betrayal have you gone through?" And that was a really good conversation. And maybe a little bit of that might come out today. We'll see. But we want to get into betrayal trauma and what that even means. It's a topic that's thrown around a lot in society, as a lot of other mental health words are. And so I feel like we need to get into that and discuss what women, especially, I think from the side of women, I think they experience it in this day and age more from a man who struggled with pornography or some kind of sexual infidelity, something that they've done. And then the female feels very betrayed and hurt. So from there, Sadie,
Sure.
where do you want to begin this conversation?
So we'd initially, Phyllis and I this is kind of something that we're really passionate about, is this betrayal trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And we specifically are interested in addressing women as a betrayer or as the betrayed in betrayal trauma. So we'll kind of refer to it as the betrayed will be referred to as she or a woman or wife.
Not excluding that, men obviously experience it, but for our topic today.
Yeah, they go through that as well. But one thing that comes up is there's a reason why betrayal falls under this trauma category. So not everything bad that happens gets to count as a trauma. So a trauma, you could classify a trauma as a trauma when it fractures the self. So the way you view yourself and the way you view the world around you is fundamentally different in a untrustworthy or negative way. So it's not just something, maybe your husband looks at pornography or you experienced infidelity. It's when that just shatters your world and you can no longer predict past, present, and future. I always tell people, we're driving through life on the freeway going 65 and we're looking in the rearview mirror only. That's kind of how we project our life going forward. And so when we're betrayed, we've had this really, really high level of trust that has come along with being in a relationship with somebody else. And when something shakes that, you no longer trust what you saw in the past. Therefore, the present is really, really uncomfortable. You're not really sure where you're at, and you certainly can't project the future.
There's a movie that a lot of you could probably, around this holiday season, what is it? National Lampoon's The Christmas Vacation with Chevy Chase, right? And I use this a lot in therapy when people ask me, what do you think of, what is trauma? And the metaphor I use is in this movie, if you haven't seen it, go ahead and watch it. I don't know. I mean, it's an okay movie, but whatever. So in this movie though, he decorates his house, right? He has in like thousands of lights, and they're everywhere. The entire home's covered in lights. And he brings his family out and he's like, hey, we got to, let's plug this in. And he takes this quick moment to make this, special thing, and he plugs it in and the lights turn on. And then one by one, they just start blowing. Like it's just blasted, like it's just blowing up basically, right? It's just too much electricity, too much is going on. And so for me, I mean, my experience with trauma in my own life is, I guess, it's relative for me. I've definitely heard of stories far worse than than I've experienced. But I do know that when you go through something where you're expecting this thing to occur, and very suddenly it went the opposite direction, your brain starts to just fire off. And all of these things, if you look at these light bulbs as like memories, I know a lot of women who I've spoken with, right? This terrible truth comes out, and now these memories all start popping, and it's like this. They're colored in now the framework of, well, was this happening then? Like, what did this mean now? This used to mean, this vacation used to mean this for us, and now it means this now, and it starts to change a lot of your world too. And so I think that's a lot of what people experience after hearing those truths, is a way of they're trying to sort all that out as well, which creates a lot of pain and a lot of frustration, a lot of, honestly, like confusion. Mm-hmm. And I loved how you said it too. I shouldn't even say, but I love the way you said it, that it fractures self. In other words, how Motyv says it, right? It's not what happens to you that matters so much as what happened inside of you as a result of what happened to you. And that's where trauma starts to occur in your daily life now. The effect of the trauma is here in your present.
Yeah. And I like how you expressed it with those light bulbs. Mm-hmm. And we often get asked that question of, well, can it go back to how it was? Like, right. Can we ever recover? And it's like, I don't know, if you think about those, I don't know, but if you think about those light bulbs and they've just burst, and I think about any other analogy where something's been destroyed, there's hope and beauty in the fact that it's been completely destroyed, because that past relationship died. It really did. Everything that you thought has been colored a little bit different, but that's where that hope lies. So when people ask, well, can it ever get better? Can we ever recover from this? It's absolutely you can, because you're building something new and it's intentional. You're not going to have faulty wiring. But yep, it's going to take restructuring everything.
I think it's almost like a reset, where for the first time maybe in the relationship, it's really authentic. I think a lot of dishonesty and hiding and secrets have been a crucial part of that relationship, and it might be the first time when, like, all of a sudden it's transparent. And it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, but I think that's where healing begins, is if, both partners can be honest and vulnerable.
You see that a lot with pornography,
yeah.
Betrayals, yep. Where there's this relief almost that it's finally out there.
From the man's side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not from the woman's side, but yeah. But even then,
it can be.
You talk to women who they'll say, I just knew something was off. I knew there was something wrong. And it's, in some ways, there is that little bit of relief, where it's,
you feel crazy.
I wasn't, yeah. That's the other thing with this betrayal trauma is you often, so there's a difference between being hurt and having things really affect the way you view yourself and the world around you. But one of those key indicators for me, when I speak with people and they're wondering, is this a trauma? It always comes out of, I feel like I'm going crazy. That's this phrase that is always a part of betrayal trauma. I feel like I'm going crazy. And you're not, but everything in your world is just turned into a kaleidoscope. The way you view it is turned into this kaleidoscope, and that will feel crazy.
Well, your brain's trying to do what it's supposed to do, which is make things safe. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what the brain does. Its job, right, is to provide or protect you. And so when it gathers information and gathers data, it's all doing it for one purpose, and that's safety. Well, and so if that safety has been broken in a sudden way, mm-hmm. or even over a long period of time, then yeah, it's still trying to gather more data of where is this safe, especially within a relationship. But sadly, as a kid, when they go through it, it's like, where do they find safety? That's what it makes it really hard. But that's where I wonder. You said something earlier. Say this is kind of not it's not off topic, but you said something earlier about the hope is in that everything broke and that like now we can restart. So how do they accept that? How do they actually accept that this can be an opportunity? Because I could hear a lot of women like, I don't want to accept that. Like, this isn't my fault, and so how do women accept it as an opportunity even? They're both like, I don't know.
Well, I'm just like feeling it
Excuse me.
of thinking that is such a heavy thing that you'd experience. And it, initially you're not going to view this with hope. The more you learn about you, the more hope you're going to find, because you start to, a lot of times what happens is we conflate hope and control. And so we lack hope when we feel powerless, or we feel like we don't have control in a situation, which betrayal trauma ends out creating quite a bit. And so you have to be careful about where you place that hope. You're not wanting to build a naive relationship. It would be naive of you to decide, okay, nope, this came out, but I can fully 100% trust this person again. You can't. You can't. You, as Jordan Peterson would say, you see their snakes now, and you recognize that you have snakes as well, and that you're both fully capable of hurting each other. And so what ends up happening is you're down to this level of transactional trust. So when you get married, you're at this trust and love kind of run parallel to each other, and they grow parallel to each other. And so the level of love that you have when you're married, that trust has to match it. And often it's naive. We don't see the snakes that somebody has. And when that gets broken, the love might remain, but the trust, you went right back down to that transactional trust. And so the hope piece comes throughout this process of rebuilding and really living that relationship intentionally.
Yeah, I guess my hesitation when you asked that question, Shayden, was, I wish I could say that on every end of betrayal, there's a spouse that wants to work as hard to make it work, right? It would be naive to say that both parties are working the same and they both want the same thing. But from the betrayed point of view, let's say the marriage doesn't work. You still have to heal from the trauma. And so to me, betrayal trauma work first is self. It's like recognizing it within yourself and working on yourself. I think I'm an advocate that I don't care what the situation is, all marriage can work if they both want to make it work. But I don't want to be naive to think that there's not, one or the other that doesn't. So betrayal trauma, in my opinion, has to begin, within yourself first, and that's why you guys are the therapists. So tell me, how does that work?
Can you say that again, Phyllis? Like that is such a pivotal thing, right?
The trauma guide, who currently has 19,000 followers, would like me to say again that betrayal work has to start without, I think, the marriage in mind, because whether you make the marriage work or not, I know a lot of marriages that don't work. And so you get to carry that trauma into the next relationship, or you get to work it out.
I always tell people that even despite the betrayal, your process in therapy, your process through healing is the same. Whether you are going to be working it out with your spouse or you're going to get divorced, whatever route you take, your role is the same. And it's that self-resiliency where you're able to identify like how you think and what contributes to the situation as far as your influence goes. And that's powerful. It's a powerful spot. And it takes away some of that hopelessness of, you cannot, when you're healing betrayal trauma, focus on the relationship first.
I think as I've sat with obviously hundreds of people in this, a space or a moment they lack that they often experience with me is how weak you've had to feel to realize how strong you actually are. You know, a good friend of mine just finished 100, Christy's husband actually just finished 100K. I mean, not 100K, 100 miler. And to think like, how weak did he feel mile 98? It's like, you're broken. You're completely broken. So because he would feel so weak, but what does it say about him? He's at mile 98. Like, it took so much strength to feel that weak, and vice versa. I've sat with many women who have wanted to stand up out of my chair and like scream and remind them that the damage that's done, that's the trauma. The damage that's done says that you are weak, that you're not capable, that you're whatever it is, that's not in agreement with what God would say to your face. Because if God came down and he'd look at you right in the face after whatever happened to you, and he says, "You're my daughter. I love you." Nothing that this man or anybody else has done to change that is actually real. It's an illusion. But through time and experience and through pain and all that, like, you've internalized it as such because of how much you care, because of how committed you've been, because of how much you've wanted to change this. But it's an illusion.
Yeah. This last week in one of my classes, we did kind of a deep dive into simple trauma versus complex trauma. And prior to that, I would have thought complex trauma would be, the trauma of being raped by a stranger or a natural disaster, like those big, ugly traumas. And, she's saying, no, like that's considered simple trauma because it's kind of a once in a lifetime thing. But complex trauma is really the thing that's like happening constantly over and over again. And I think, let's take pornography, for example. I think in a marriage where pornography is a piece of it, there's a lot of complex trauma that happens because there's a lot of deception, there's a lot of lies. And so the finding out about the pornography is that trauma, but there's so much more that has to heal in that complex part, like the honesty, the transparency, and that's, for all intents and purposes, a little bit trickier to heal from. Like that those other big things that came when you found out about the porn, it's everything below it.
So how do women, what do you think are maybe the top 3 things that women, when they find out their husband has gone through, is struggling with pornography, whether they catch him or he divulges it, whatever, what do you feel like are some of like the top 3 messages that wives take in oftentimes, and how they internalize that?
I'm not enough is one that comes up. That I don't think I've ever talked to anybody that's faced that didn't have that belief come up of I'm not enough. A lot of times it's just this part of what makes the betrayal so hard is you have this view of your spouse that, they're amazing. And what a beautiful thing that you believe that in them, that they are just everything. And now all of a sudden you're viewing them as, wow, like I almost, what happens is the betrayed will end up seeing their spouse's weakness before they see them as a human being. And so all of a sudden they reverse roles. This was like my hero. This was my everything person. And now they're just these flaws. And that comes up quite a bit.
Which is, from the man side, that's felt anyway, like without you, for sure. Which there's no blame. Like, it's not saying you shouldn't feel that way. Definitely, but men are already assuming that in the moment too, which makes it an even more difficult situation to navigate.
I'm sure.
Because how am I supposed to connect to you and feel worthy? Like, I need to step up and like be a better man and to like almost earn my connection with you because I've hurt you, but I also can't leave you in the dust. Like, so if I have to be happier, more joyful, more powerful, but you're also really hurt, it can honestly feel like I'm leaving you behind, which isn't good either. So
the betrayed face does that as well, I see this more with infidelity than with pornography use, but that happens as well, where it's, if I heal if I work on those things in me that have now been exposed, that I now have to contend with because of this trauma coming up, what if it's the phrase of like, what if I outgrow you? What if I view myself as up here now, and therefore I view you down here? How does that marriage work?
And I've even seen it where the woman feels like if they do offer forgiveness, that they're putting their stamp of approval. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that condoning.
The condoning or enable, like they don't want to, condone or enable. And I think sex addiction in general is hard because I don't know, and you guys can probably speak to this more, but I don't know anybody who goes from actively acting out, whether it be pornography or whatever, to just stopping overnight. Usually there's a couple slips. I think the progress is different than sometimes drugs and alcohol is, because it's, intimacy is a part of life. And, just like food, I struggle with food addiction. I think I would classify myself as a food addict, and, like I hate it. And yet I do really good, and I have slips all the time, and I think sex addiction is similar to that. And so it's really difficult, I think, in a marriage, because if you expect that person to be perfect overnight, it's not going to happen. You're going to be disappointed, because it's from my experience with talking to couples, and it's a process, and it's, progress over perfection, I guess. I think it would be wrong to think that, there aren't going to be little caveats.
It's kind of that, what comes to mind is, I think most people's exposure to betrayal trauma would be like in the movies, and the spouse has an affair, and then they're like begging, please, like, I'm so sorry, I was such an idiot, and they do some grand gesture, and the wife is like kind of upset about it still, but she takes them back, and oh, that just couldn't be farther from what I typically see.
There's some flowers.
Yeah, here's some
How many
flowers.
flowers is this?
Here's this really nice thing. But the heartbreaking thing with it is, it's not what typically happens is the betrayed is usually not the first to reach out and to chase the spouse down. So it's usually the one that was betrayed that is running after their spouse saying, come on, please, let's work this out. Like, we have a family, we've got kids, we've got like all these hopes and dreams. Like, let's just make it work. And the spouse that betrayed is also dealing with some things.
I think they're
not
like
going to switch just like that all of a sudden, oh yeah, what was I thinking? I think there are a few instances where that comes about, like just a few, but for the most part, it's usually that one that's betrayed, and it adds to that feeling of betrayal that they're the one chasing.
I've seen too, though, where the sex addict feels like you could do better than me. And so they don't chase because they literally think like you'd be better without me, but the betrayed is like, fight for me. I want to see you fight for me.
I always tell people it's kind of like this racetrack, like this infinity shaped racetrack. And you and your spouse are going to you're on that same track, but you're not going the same speeds, and you're not in the same lane, but you're going to be experiencing the same stuff. Because just because you're the betrayer doesn't mean that you're not going to be facing or having to contend with some of those same awful things that the betrayed initially has to contend with. And so that brings a lot of peace. I actually had a couple.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
I just had this thought of, because there's no betrayal without self-betrayal.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
what I heard you just say.
Mm-hmm.
In order to betray someone, there has to be self-betrayal first. And so betrayal being a mechanism like we're talking about right now, the one who did hurt, let's just say the man, right? He's going to be going through his own betrayal trauma, if you will, and how in his form of shame, of how much he hates himself, how much he just, honestly, I'm not worth being loved. I've hurt you. It's that simple. If I've hurt you, how dare I ask for love? Like, how dare I? So now I have to wait for you. But then you just said, please fight for me. Mm-hmm. How the hell am I supposed to fight for you? Sorry, that's probably the first time.
This is the first time Shayden's ever sworn on a podcast.
I can't. It's because my cousin's here. How am I, I'm supposed to fight for you. It feels so hypocritical. It's unbelievable. Like the hypocrisy that feels like, right? For most men.
But the lack of it to a woman feels like you don't care. Like it just justifies, I am not enough. I am
Even
not.
more.
Yeah, even more.
Makes
Like
sense.
it's such a
This is
system.
so good.
Don't you know? It's just a system, I think. Like
That's why your track is so good.
Yeah,
I loved
yeah.
it.
I assigned it to a couple where I had them. I don't know what their track looked like, but I had them. I said, here, you want to try something weird? I said, because
This
it's
is one of your moments, huh?
yeah, I guess. Yeah, one of my moments. I always say that. I'm like, okay, it's me, so I'm going to be asking something weird of you. But I challenged them to create a track and label different parts of it: resentment, shame, guilt, blame.
This is trademarked, by the way, in case someone wants to steal it.
Yeah. I'm gonna put it on Etsy.
Keep going. Sorry, people are like,
Put it on
shut up,
Etsy.
Shayden.
No, but you label it with all of these different things that you're coming across, because you cannot read your spouse at this time, and your spouse can't read you. You're reading each other's reactions to an event, and it is not predictable. It is not fair for either of you to try to be reading what the other person is putting out there. And so they would move their little car on the track, little magnet car on the track.
Oh, yeah, you told me about this.
Yeah.
Like they made it and put it on the wall.
They made it and put it on the wall so that when they were seeing their spouse do something, maybe their spouse was a little bit withdrawn, or maybe their spouse was crying a lot, they could see what it was, where they were at in their healing, or where they were at
in their experience.
Yeah, that was showing those emotions and showing those behaviors. And it really, really helped them, because they were able to see, like visually see where the other person was at, because you can't read the other person at the time.
Because you're so in yourself too.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just hard to see it for what it really is.
Yeah, and nothing makes sense anymore. So
explain that more.
So because the past was fractured and you thought you had this person down and you knew what their behavior, if they act this way, they're feeling this and it will lead to this, all of a sudden you can't view that anymore. That doesn't make sense. You have no map of the world. And so you're constantly trying to create one. And so this often comes, well, not often, it always comes out in these, I dare say, in questions. And so the husband will get really, really annoyed. Like, I've answered this 5 times already today.
Yeah, I was going to say today.
Yeah. And you keep asking me. And it's like, yep, because now I'm feeling this. When I asked you before, I was feeling angry and I wanted to make sense of this event through that anger lens. Now I'm feeling confusion. I want to make sense of this event through that mode. Now I'm feeling, and it just goes and goes and goes. But you're trying to see ways that you can predict their behavior and ways that safety can be established. And so if I know enough, then I can feel safe. But unfortunately, we can't think our way to a feeling, and especially a feeling of safety. And so there's no amount of your spouse telling you, like, okay, here's why I did this and here's what happened, that's going to calm that emotion.
So what would?
Ooh, that is such a loaded question, because so much of it goes down to that self-work. So if you have this belief, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, you're going to be reading something from your spouse that's going to confirm that. And so you've got to contend with that so that you can't be triggered.
So if only people had like one more piece of the puzzle that they could turn to, who's like this infinite loving person that could like really help you to feel safe in those moments, that would be really cool. That's, that he could be there continually and assure and give power to you and give strength to you. I mean, that would be, if only that could exist, that this personal work wasn't just like with myself by myself. That'd be amazing.
But we do. It's the same thing we come across with all personal work, though. We have this like, I want to control this. I want to predict my world. I want to feel safe, so I'm going to control it, instead of handing it over to the power that would actually make us not feel like we have to control things.
But sometimes even that phrase someone listening may have been like, ooh, hand it over. Like, it's
Mhm.
like, that's such a cliche phrase, as opposed to, in my feel, working with him. Like, it's just my teammate who is with me in these emotions and is assuring that one simple testimony that breaks the message that came from the experience.
Well, yeah,
Right? Does that make
so
sense?
much of trauma is you weren't witnessed.
Right.
And so
Absolutely.
having, whether it's you or Jesus, like being a witness with you, that makes all the difference, to know that somebody sees you and hears you. The reason I use the phrase
But what if I'm mad at him? Sorry. What if I'm
You're
mad
good.
at him for letting it happen to me?
Then
Because that's, I think, message number 2. When I said, what are some
mhm.
of the main messages? I'm not enough. And I think message number 2 is, you forgot me. Like, it's like betrayal number 2 is my husband just betrayed me. And now, God, you allowed this. Or I've been praying. I've been trying to help him. I've been trying to get it so he wouldn't do this again. And it hasn't, like, he's not changing, or it hasn't worked. And now I'm betrayed by not only my husband, but another man. I think a lot of women struggle.
I
No, you don't have to speed.
no, well, that's a complex one for me, because I try to put myself in those shoes. And although I've experienced quite a bit, and I've experienced a lot of traumas, not a lot, but a handful, enough,
Plenty.
plenty. Yeah. Those who know me are like, yeah, that's fair. I didn't get to that place. And so, but I can appreciate those that do. But I would say God can't make you his victim. And so it goes against the characters of God, or the characteristics of God, for him to do something that weakens you or punishes you. Everything that happens means, so let's say God is allowing this, like you're Job now, and God's allowing all these things to just be taken from you. Again, it's not, hey, I want to see, we're not down here for a suffering contest. Let's see how much this person can suffer. It's, will they turn to me? Will they turn to me? Will they turn to me? That's the whole phrase of repentance. Repentance means to turn toward Christ. And so in these moments, we need that repentance as much as the betrayer does. We need to know how to turn toward Christ. And when we turn toward him, yeah, there's going to be those times where we're pissed and we might turn to him in anger.
Mm-hmm.
But are we turning to him? And that's a start. That's that very first start, to be able to see how we can use what we're facing to not weaken us, but to reveal something in us that our character demands, that will help refine us.
Wow.
I don't know if that answered your question.
It did.
Okay. The reason I say hand over, and this kind of goes with it, is I picture, here we have this thing that becomes really sacred to us. Although it's a terrible thing, it's our terrible thing. And we're holding on to it. And I can't receive something from you if my arms are full and it's heavy, but I don't know how to just let it go, because then what? And so if I hand it over to Christ, what does he hand me in return? Peace. But sometimes we don't want peace. Oftentimes we're wanting revenge.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes we want justification. Oftentimes we want to have this feeling of just happiness even. And that's not always what we're going to get. So even in the midst of our suffering, we can have peace. But in the midst of our suffering, we probably won't experience much happiness or joy.
You said it. That's what I want people to hear that are listening. When we say hand it over to Christ, we often then focus just on the event, and people don't know what that means. And what I heard you say, no, you already answered. I'm just repeating it. What it means to hand it over means hand over the benefits of me holding on to it.
Yeah.
So if I'm holding on to it, again, I'm holding it. Why? Because it protects me. It feels I can use it. I can use it as revenge. It's something that helps me to sometimes
Move
feel like I have
forward.
control, move forward.
Mm-hmm.
All of those benefits, Christ already knows and says, I promise I can do better. I can handle all those benefits. You're not even going to lose any of them. Now the revenge side might look a little different. Like let's just use that for change, but I would say that's usually the last little grip on the thing when you're trying to hand it over. That's like the last piece a lot of the time is like I am going to give up like wanting them to hurt and punished, because again,
Sure.
hurt people when we're hurt.
Yeah.
It's easy
Well,
to
and
want to hand it back.
you're guarded by all these things. And when you give those up, ooh, now all of a sudden you're aware
It's very
of your
vulnerable.
insecurities. You're aware of your shortcomings, and that is so painful. So we'd rather mask it all.
Which again makes you feel weak, but how strong
Mhm.
is that?
Yeah, how
Right.
strong it
That's
is to
so
be able to
strong.
feel
But you'll
all those
feel
things.
weak,
Mhm.
but you're not.
Yeah. I always relate it to like a suit of armor. You've got your chainmail and you've got, head to toe, just covered in armor, and you are protected. And this might be all of those justified feelings that you have. You were hurt, you were betrayed. It makes sense that you would put all that on. But now if I were to hand you like this cute, squishy baby, you can't feel how sweet and soft it is. If I hand you a cat, you can't feel the soft fur. And so
Stretchy pants.
That's because cats are dumb. But
I used to think so. But okay, a dog or
Just playing.
something, a minky blanket.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you can't feel that. And so the benefit of giving it up is so that you can feel those things that matter. But oh, boy, is that scary.
Yeah, totally.
Because anything could hit you now.
Which again goes back to Phyllis's point of honestly how important it is that both people get on board. Because it is. You can still do this on your own.
Mm-hmm.
But if the reciprocity from the spouse is continual danger, continual hurt, I wouldn't even say that that's necessarily relapse. It's like a lack of honesty, a lack of transparency, a lack of effort on their side of seeing you. That's where it sometimes gets to that point of like, what is my boundary? How much more can I take with this? And again, I'm for anyone can work anything out. It's all about want to, but there has to come a point where both people have to see this too for what it is. And because that type of safety work, again, what's the point of healing too if I can't connect? Like, again, we want to be able to heal, even if I guess we stayed a hermit the rest of our life. There is some benefit to that, but for sure we have to be able to reconnect. So,
well, that's that huge component of identity is made up of a connection to ourself, others, and God. And so if you're not able to connect, you haven't really healed that identity. I was thinking, as we talk about trust, like, yep, you might not be able to trust your spouse right now, and they might continually break that trust, but it requires that you put trust in someone that you can trust, which is that higher power. Right? And so you have the trust there.
Or you have percentages of it, as I like to talk about it.
Sure.
And seeing trust as a spectrum rather than an all or nothing. Like what can I trust right now? It grows, but just
I like
always.
that.
And it is that's a good point actually, because if people take trust as all or nothing,
and they do,
your emotions are going to swing, and everything's going to swing so hard, as opposed to seeing there's so many other things you can trust. You can trust that he's providing a lot of the time. You can trust that he's good with the kids a lot of the time. There's so many other spheres, even in your relationship, that like he does make me laugh, and I can trust these things.
Yeah, and you
but in
have
this
to
area,
look for
this
those.
is these small moments where I think I can trust. Maybe it's a sexual thing or something where it's like I think I can trust this right now, just because of the way that he's been.
I've come across many people that the relationship didn't end when the affair happened, and it didn't end because of the affair. It ended, well, they won't say that it ended because of the affair. It's things like, well, I asked him to change the oil in the car and he said he did and he didn't. Like little things like that end up breaking this relationship because we don't know how to measure that trust anymore. And so I like to tell my clients that instead of like, yes, look for those moments that you can trust, those things that you can trust, those transactional things. I know that he will go to work. I know that he's going to come home around 5 or 6. I know that he's in a shower every day. I know that he's going to eat however small it needs to be. You find those areas of trust, but then you look for the accountability that person's taking. So if we go back to that spot of asking a million questions every day over and over and over again, because you're looking for that one thing that you're looking for, but you don't realize is that accountability. How willing is my husband?
To be accountable on his own,
or to talk about these things that I'm asking. Is he guarded? Is he thinking of my feelings? Is he being selfish? Whatever it is, that accountability is so huge in building trust that it's not about what they say, it's their willingness to say, it's their willingness to be open.
That's what I've seen is that marriages that work, that's the switch, is when he or she is committed to being honest and he or she is willing to not freak out.
Yep.
And work together. You know, I am reading this book, Moving Beyond Betrayal, and it has a Bill of Rights for the betrayed. And the first thing on that Bill of Rights is that you have the right to be wrong. Because I think when that trust is broken, now everything is viewed through the lens of dishonesty. You know, like, what can I believe? Nothing feels the same, you know. And we tell ourselves a lot of stories. And the truth is, there's going to be times you're just wrong. You know, that he's not acting out or he's not doing that or this, and that also give yourself, you have the right to be wrong. You know, I think it takes away a little bit of the craziness there too, because you do just overthink everything.
Yeah.
I like that because, excuse me, my voice is doing good so far.
That's what you think. Just kidding. Cut that. Just kidding.
Welcome to the Motyv podcast. But yeah, with that, we've discussed that before, where it really matters to have that Bill of Rights, that it does play that part in your healing.
Yeah. And, you know, men, women, be honest. Men, women, don't freak out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you love each other, it will be okay.
Well, it feels as though you can't trust you anymore.
Yeah.
And that's part of that betrayal of self, or just, well, not even, I don't know. I guess betrayal of self as well. When I think of the husband that, you know, had an affair, I've talked to many that are like, I didn't see this coming. I didn't think that this is something I would ever do. But it goes back to not being able to trust your reactions. And when it comes to women, we're so, I don't want to speak for all women, but I'd say more women than men are focused on interpreting the world around them through emotions. And so when we can't trust our emotions, we feel like we can't trust anything.
Well, and
Because what am I reading anymore?
Our emotional brain is so fast. Like, the logic brain lags, you know, emotional brain quick. And so it's really easy to lead out with emotion, you know, and then have all the that comes with it, you know, before like the logic catches up to it.
Allowing it to slow down so that you can accept that I might be feeling this, but it might not be like inspiration from God.
Yes.
It might be an emotion.
Yep.
Right.
I love that.
So what I'm hearing, and maybe we can close it here, is God is no respecter of persons, but he is a respecter of principles. And I believe marriages are about being, or I would say healthy relationships is being what you want to receive. Being what you want to receive. That principle demands respect. And in this situation that we've been talking about today, it makes that principle so difficult to live. To be betrayed, to be the betrayer, and then to say, I want to be what I would like to receive. So I betrayed you and I would love to receive love. And now, so that means I have to show that when I don't deserve it. And then I'm you and I want safety. And I have to show safety somehow when you've hurt me so much. It is. I hope you feel seen. If you've been listening to this, you know, that you feel seen and heard, that we get it. It's so hard. But again, it always comes back to, what do you want? What do you want? And if you want him, if you want her, If you want eternal family, if you want it, you can make it happen. And I've seen it. I've seen situations. I know one person right now is probably listening to this right now, and she knows who I'm talking to, and she is the epitome of a situation, to be honest, where it's just mind-bogglingly beautiful that they are making it happen, and against all odds. And it's because of a choice that they made to make it happen. So
I think those are future podcasts
yeah,
to talk about that why.
yeah,
Well, and I love that we leave this podcast on hope, because there is hope. In Jesus
absolutely.
Christ, there is hope. And he can take the burnt to the ground house and he can build it a beautiful mansion. I've
Yep.
had a firsthand witness of that
Yep.
multiple times. So there's
You
hope.
can. Well, thanks everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
This was awesome.
It's good.
That was from the heart. That was cool. Okay, everyone. Follow us on YouTube. Follow us wherever you want, even in our office.
See you.